Well, welcome back to part 2 of this monster restoration. It's pretty small compared to some of the stuff we've done. But, you know, it's probably just as intricate and you have to take your time. Remember, there's no hurry on any of this stuff. There's never a hurry. Keep that in mind. Never, ever. I don't care what it is. This is a hobby, guys. It's not a race. We're not here to, say I'm better than the next guy. Although there are some out there, they want to show everybody how brilliant they are. Me, I'm not brilliant. I admit it right off the bat. I just slog along and take what other people have shown me, what other people have taught me. Namely, my electronics mentor, Brendan, up in the Detroit area, in Michigan. And I apply it, and hopefully when we're done we have a nice product to pass on to future generations. To me, that's what it's all about. That's what our hobby is all about, just like restoring an old car, old Model T. Can you imagine where we'd be if all the Model Ts and Model A's and all them were totally gone and all we had left to look at was photographs? That would be terrible. Alright, enough of my soapbox. I discovered, well, last night, first off, when I came home last night, I took some of this liquid tape. I have a brand new bottle I bought a while back. And I went ahead, I was concerned about this crack in this speaker. I just put a very thin coat on last night before I went to bed. Just enough to, bridge the gap between the two halves that were broken. And it's pretty solid right now, but we're not done with that. That's pretty solid. It's not broken. What we're going to do is I have a piece of fiberglass here. It's the stuff they use. Normally I use dryer cloth. The dryer softener cloth. That stuff works great. You can't hardly rip it. Works great. It's easy to work with. But I'm thinking maybe this stuff here would work even better, and it's easier even to work with. And what this is that black matting stuff you put in your garden to keep the weeds from coming up under the flower beds. You lay it on the ground and you put I have a lot of that left over, so why not give it a try? It's fiberglass, and I've cut it, and this thing is going to fit it even conforms nicely to the shape of the speaker. Look at that. Is that cool? Just fits right on up in there. It'll go in there just like that. It'll be great. And that'll solve that entire problem. So that's going to be one more problem done. I'm going to do that today before I go to work. It's the early morning. And I took some air, just a regular old can of air, and this dust off electronic stuff. I sprayed it up around where the voice coil is, and kept moving the cone in and out while I was doing it, and a lot of dust and crap came out of there. I spoke with Brendan yesterday. He said the reason this thing is rubbing is because the spider is what's causing it to rub. The spider's out of alignment and all that jazz. And the spider on this thing is not your typical spider. It's a metal spider, a coil, like a flat spring. And it's mounted. Some of the old Philcos had them right here, with a screw in the center. You could unloosen it, move your cone back and forth the way you wanted it, and then tighten it up. And that enabled the cone to come in and out like this. It's what provides the springing action you see right here. See, when I take that spider off, and that thing would not come back out. It would just go in and stay. So they used a larger spider, but it's on the rear of the cone, and it's glued to the back of the cone. I'll show you that at a later time. So what we're going to do today is we're going to work on this stuff here. We're going to remove these felt pads. Now I've already removed one. Let me get this light out of the way, maybe make it easier to see. I've already removed one, and this is it right here. And it's held on. Let me get down here a little focus better. There we go. It's held on by little tiny screws from the rear. They go through these holes in the basket here and here. And then on the back of the felt, I'll tell you what, this is what you call quality work back in the 20s. Man alive, you'd never see anything remotely close to that today, because on the back of the felt is a metal plate, and there's where the screws went in. They just held it in place like that. Isn't that neat? And then of course the surround that went from the cone to the basket that supported the cone out here, it was sandwiched between the metal bracket, and you can see some of it right there. That's part of the cone right here. This is really rusty. This is the old surround right here. You can see part of it. Anyway, what I'm going to have to do because I'm going to have to take an X-Acto knife or a box cutting knife or something. I'm going to have to gently cut off the felt, which would be not that difficult because some of it's already loose anyway, just from age. See how it's kind of loose already. And then I'm going to have to soak all these metal brackets in Evapor-Rust for about 3-4 days until they get nice and clean. And let me go ahead and I'll tell you what, that's our next step. So we'll go ahead and just take off all of these things and see if we can't get the felt separated. By the way, I'm also going to take out, I think I'll take out this this rectifier thing here, which I'm sure one of the subscribers had mentioned it, and I had already researched it. This is not really a selenium rectifier. This is the predecessor to it. This is probably a copper oxide. Look that up in your Funk and Wagnalls or your Google. It's a copper oxide rectifier. Yeah, and it'll show you just layers of copper with some kind of crap between them. I didn't go into the details when I looked it up, but I think it's kind of neat. I'm going to go ahead and take that off today too, so we can better look down inside underneath this field coil down in there with a flashlight and see what we got. I'd love to see a tube down in there, but I know it's not there. It's kind of interesting whenever I work on one of these old pieces of equipment, especially one that's really old. And I don't work on that many from the 1920s. Most of the things I work on are from the 1930s. Those are the radios that interest me most and the equipment that interests me most. But whenever this thing was made 89 years ago. And 89 years ago, somebody in a factory, some American in a factory, he may have been an immigrant from overseas, you don't know, working for a living, probably for 50 cents a day or 35 cents a day, working like a dog. Might have been a woman, might have been a man, don't know. And 89 years ago, they put this screw in here by hand. None of this stuff was done with automated machinery and everything. It had to be assembled by hand, probably in a long assembly line. One guy put the basket or these things on, or the basket on, then the next guy put that on, and who knows, maybe the next guy put the rectifier on, I don't know. Or a woman, as I said. And here I am 89 years later, considering this thing was built in 1928. Now if it was built in 1927, it would be 90 years later, but 1 year difference is no big deal either way. So here I am, figure 89 years later, taking the same screw out that some fellow or some woman put in that long ago. Isn't that interesting? I always get a little thrill out of that when I take things apart, knowing that somebody else's hand many decades ago had put it together. Well, all of these were held on by the small screws, as I told you, from the rear. However, the last one down at the bottom where the base is, the bottom of the speaker, this one was held on with screws from the front, not the rear. And there's a nut on the back that's holding it on. So you have to be very careful, by the way, when you take these screws out. Make sure you got the right size screwdriver. Don't use the wrong size screwdriver. You'll pay the price if you do. But the blade has to fit the screw. Don't use one that's too big or too small. It has to be just right. If you don't have one, a blade that fits the screw slot, then don't, I'm not talking about working on a speaker. I'm talking about working on any piece of old equipment. Because of the rustiness and everything that you run into, if you don't use the right size screwdriver, or as they say, the right tool for the right job, you will suffer the consequences, trust me. And then it's going to be, oh my God, what do I do now? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and loosen these, and hopefully, apparently this lip right here, let me see if I can see that lip right there on the end, that pointed lip. I think that's underneath the heads of these screws, and that's what's holding this one on. We'll find out. We'll take a look at it. Well, ask me if I was wrong about that, taking that screw out there and that screw out there. Yes, I was wrong. I mean, yeah, they had to come out, but that did not loosen this pad with the backing plate. If you'll look very closely there, you'll see that I still have that screw there to remove and that one there to remove in order to get that pad and the plate off. Oh my goodness. So what do we do now? Well, the two bolts that were here and here loosened up the front part of this plate, and it's an easy thing, to just go ahead and come around the back and loosen up the rest of the screws and everything and get this plate to where it'll fold away this way. It would seem like it's easy. You'll see that the audio output transformer wires are very short. They just run from here straight up and solder to the speaker. And let me see, yeah, they solder right there, right down in there. Very short wires, so it's not like I'm able to take these screws off and then swing the whole thing down because there's not enough wire there. So ask me if that presents a problem. Yes, it does. I got to figure this one out. I need to get those screws out back there, or I won't even be able to change the surround actually. So I think I'll take a break from this, have a cup of coffee, and then come back and see what can be done. Well, here's the plan of attack, folks. These 3 screws have to come out in order to remove this base or get the base plate to where it'll swing at all. You know, so I mean that's a given. We have no choice. So let's do that first and see what pops up next. The screws are out, and this is not a good opportunity for me to tell you something. You see these lock washers on these things? A little lock washer on each one of them. Do not reuse them. Do not, when you're working on a radio, I don't care what it is, try not to reuse lock washers that were on there for, in this case, almost 90 years. This is what happens. See how brittle that thing is? This one broke right in half. Broke right in half as soon as I cracked the nut loose, or the screw loose, and it wasn't on one of these. It was on the front screws. Those 2 that had the nuts down here I was telling you about. Don't use them. They're junk. They're no good. They're not good for anything. Get new ones. They don't cost that much. Go to a hardware store, Lowe's, Home Depot, whatever. Get some decent ones, okay, when you put it back together. Here's the second part to this. With the screws removed, the 3 screws removed, I'm thinking this angle screwdriver might be the key to my salvation on this. All I need is enough space to get that speaker to move forward enough to where I can slip this in there and crack loose those screws. And once they're very, very short screws. Once I crack them loose, it shouldn't take much to get them the rest of the way out. There's only like about 4 or 5 threads maximum. So maybe I can even get my fingers up in there and get them out. Let's see how that'll work out. Well, I used my old bottle of liquid tape to hold the speaker up to give me enough flexibility, and these wires are pretty much stretched to the max. Got to be very careful. I got my screwdriver in there and I held it in like this. I sort of squeezed my finger using my thumb on the outside, my finger on this side, and I squeezed it in there so it wouldn't slip out of the head on the screwdriver. If you do that, you strip that head, you're really, I mean, I don't know what you can do then. I guess just drill it out or hopefully get a small pair of needle nose vice grips on it or something. But this, it did crack loose, I'm happy to say. And we can go ahead and get that the rest of the way out. Isn't that cool? Well, that second one up in there does not want to cooperate. It is really frozen in there. And I don't want to strip out that slot, that's for sure. So what do we do? What do we do now? We whip it. That's what we do. We can figure this out. Well, there it is. The last screw is out. But you know, a certain degree of luck played a part in this. Let me explain it. Now you're going to learn why it's important before you tear anything apart to give it a good eyeballing from top to bottom. Do a really close inspection. And you know, during the inspection I did back when I restored the Atwater Kent 37, I also took a look at this speaker, and it seems to me I hooked it up if I remember, and it played good. And I realized that someone, you know, there was a lot of electrical tape over here, and I warned everybody not to do that sort of thing. Don't be using electrical tape. Wait until you get the proper tools, proper equipment to hook up this stuff correctly, okay? If you don't have it, don't do that. Wait until you get the right stuff. But I also noticed that down in here in the bowels of the speaker there was some more electrical tape, which meant that someone had been in there. Someone had been messing with these wires. Well, right away that brings up the question, well, wait a minute. How did he get down in here to do that? He obviously had to do the same thing I'm doing, except, you know, for removing the felt pads, the screws for the felt pads and brackets. But how did he get down in here? Well, he had to have removed the speaker screws from the rear, and he had to have removed the 2 front screws that were here and here that held the speaker to the bottom of this part of the bracket. And then he had to deal with the same thing I was thinking about dealing with, was the very short audio output transformer wires, which are over here, this one and this one. So how did he do that? Well, I got examining this thing a little bit closer, and I noticed that he had cut the wire here. The wire has been cut, and then they resoldered it back on incorrectly, because as soon as I pushed on that wire with my finger, look what happened. It popped right off the stub of the audio output transformer. Just popped right off. I don't know what was holding it on. And the same thing over here. This wire right here was loose from this terminal right here. But it may have to be that way. I haven't quite. Let me move this wire out of the way and give you an idea of what I'm talking about. See that terminal down in there? This is to the power transformer. This wire here was connected to that terminal there, and again it was improperly soldered, so all I did was push on it with my finger and it just came right out. Now the question is, what's underneath this electrical tape? Anyway, the screw's out. I'm going to go ahead and remove the last pad. Let me get this light out of the way here. We'll remove this last pad and separate the pad from the brackets, and then go ahead and get it soaking, the brackets soaking in the evapor rust. But I might take the brackets to work with me today and work them over on a wire brush, the wire brush wheel on the grinder at work. Try to get some of that rust off there before, the heavy stuff and what's left of the surround, and then bring it home and do the soaking starting tonight when I get home from work. But we're going to definitely look down in there and take that tape off. Until next time, this is John.